Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Nora, Mulinda, one thing you have to know about how we roll here
Tell
at
me.
Bloomberg Businessweek is we like to wine and dine.
I love it here.
Okay, you do? Okay, good. That was a quick response. On Fridays, we sometimes get to do that. Celeste Beatty is going to help us do just that. She's founder of Harlem Brewing Company. She's also the first Black woman to own a brewery in the United States, and she's got a brand new cookbook out, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We're going to talk beer. We're going to talk food. But first, you've got a really cool story that starts with a homebrew kit in a closet. How did it go? Take us into your story.
Well, yeah. So I did start as a home brewer in my studio apartment at the time in Harlem. The home brewing kit was a gift that I didn't use for quite a while, so things didn't turn out that great.
It kind of happens with like these type of gifts, right?
It does. But I wasn't deterred and decided to get another kit and keep trying to brew, and voila.
Okay, so a lot happened in between that and voila.
Lots of beers.
Yeah.
Some trial and error.
Some trial and error.
Absolutely.
What was it? You weren't even like initially attracted to. It wasn't like you had been drinking beer and saw this homebrew kit and went to buy it and thought you could do it yourself. What was the moment where you realized, hey, I actually like doing this?
Cooking.
Okay.
Cooking with beer, cooking with wine. I like to experiment
Really?
with things. And infusing beer was something I fell in love with early on. Wine and even spirits. It just gave a whole nother layer of flair that I didn't know.
Wait, so the cooking brought you to beer?
Pretty much. I mean, I did try a little bit of beer in college and a few other places. But anyway.
As one
but
does.
cooking
Right.
is what really gave me a passion. And then learning about the history.
I mean, what were some of your favorite dishes? Of course, maybe in the amateur stage of playing around with this trial and error beer, what were you cooking?
Soups.
Okay.
My initial tool was my mom's soup pot, and I was able to basically do soup and add the beer to the soups that I made, vegetable soups, stews. It just added so much flavor to it that I'd never experienced before, that I fell in love with. And then a few of my friends said, this isn't bad.
I always thought you were supposed to use not good beer to cook. Like the microbrews you kind of leave for drinking. I know this is true with wine. You sort of,
Right.
use the junky wine to cook.
Well, I think
What am I getting wrong here?
junky wine might mean junky food. I don't know. But no. I mean, the essence
That's
is always
obviously
there.
I'm not a sommelier.
Yeah, well, at the time that I was cooking with beer, it was your Sam Adams, your Anchor Steams. I was looking at trying to find something.
This was
that
what,
had
the
a
1990s?
1990s.
Okay.
So
And there wasn't a whole craft brew movement at that point.
there really wasn't exactly. I mean, it wasn't like now 9,500 breweries. I mean, there's so many different amazing beers out there. But at the time, there really weren't that many, and certainly not in a local marketplace.
So how did you really get this off of its feet? I imagine you started out by having your friends try everything, and they were like, we got to take it and show it to other people. Tell me about that origin story.
Yeah, first letting them taste it in the food dishes that I love to make. My spaghetti sauces, my stews, my soups, I would share that. And then when I started actually home brewing, I was able to share those cans and bottles, actually at the time there were no canners, with my friends. Restaurants, Sylvia's Restaurants, I told the story many times, is one of the restaurants I shared my home brews with, and they were also the first restaurant to give us an order. And that feedback just grew. And the other thing that happened is that the community that became my home, Harlem, the village of Harlem, was going through what some say is a second renaissance. A lot of entrepreneurship, revitalization going on. So a lot of people around me were starting businesses. And I began to get feedback from them and was encouraged after some of the not so great brews got better. They were like, this isn't bad. I think you're onto something here.
So fast forward a couple decades. Here we are.
A couple of decades.
2024.
2024. 2025.
You do have cans of beer now.
Yes, we do.
You do have. It's not just bottles. We have some here in the studio, which we are going to talk about in just a few minutes.
Sure.
How do you get to the point where you go from home brewing to actually opening a brewery, the infrastructure involved with that, the investment involved with that? How do you make it into a business?
So there are a couple of ways. One way is to build it from the ground up. Another way is to collaborate with other breweries, and that's what we did. not enough time here to get into the details of some of the challenges socially and from a perspective from the community standpoint.
We've got
we have
time.
time.
We've
really?
Oh, we have time.
Yeah.
We'd
Please
love
do.
to hear it.
Well, yeah, so there's a number of ways that you can get there. One is, as I said, contract brewing, collaboration brewing. We took the collaboration brewery route because it was difficult to open up a brewery in the middle of a community, especially a historic community like Harlem. You really want to respect it. You want to be mindful of where you are, many beautiful churches and institutions. So I went the route of homebrewing my beer first, and then establishing Harlem Brewing Company, and then going to an amazing brewery in Saratoga Springs, New York, where we canned our first bottle and then eventually canned our recipes.
Is that still? Sorry, Nora. Go ahead.
I just wanted to talk a bit more about the challenges as we've been discussing. I mean, of course, when we think about beer, I immediately think of white men. It's a white male-dominated space. What is it like being a Black woman in the industry?
It's now it's better. At the time, I would go into places and they thought I was coming there to do a promotion. I could tell them about beer, speak about the ingredients, and talk about beer, but it kind of went over many people's heads. They were like, "What are you talking about? Aren't you here to do a promotion?" But it was tough, not just as a Black woman, but as a woman in general. But over time, as more women through the Pink Boots Society, I can give them a shout out. More and more women have come into the industry, so we have more peers to talk to. So it's gotten a lot better, but I think women only represent about 7% of the brewers, and probably less than 25% of the teams, parts of the teams and staff of breweries.
Were you surprised to find that you are the first Black woman to own a brewery in the U.S.? Like when that happened, were you like, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense?
I said, no way I can be the first Black woman in America to launch a commercial beer. I usually state it that way. But I think because of the complications of our history, there are many other Black women that brewed beer. I mean, you can look through the records during enslavement, prior to enslavement, all over the continent of Africa. There are Black women, Black and brown women that brew beer. So I just think maybe that story hasn't been told, and there is a story that we told through a beer we made to celebrate the life of Patsy Young, who was an enslaved brewer who became free and brewed freely for 14 years in eastern North Carolina. Whoopi Goldberg actually lended her face to that story, and we launched that beer last year. So that's one of the stories I point to, because that was 1806. So there are women that are unknown, but when you uncover the history and you start talking about those stories, you discover that really pretty much everything except maybe the tech stuff, somebody's done it. So
Well, I want to dig back to the food. I'm a foodie. Digging back into this book, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul cookbook, food cookbook. What are some of your favorite dishes? What should we be looking for in this cookbook?
Well, we celebrated our 50th family reunion in North Carolina in July, and there's always a competition of who's going to make the best banana pudding, mac and cheese, what's the dish? And the dish for my family, particularly on the dessert end, is banana pudding. So we make, in the book, there's a recipe that honors my aunt, Betty, which is a brew nana pudding. So we infuse our Harlem Renaissance wheat beer. It's not a hoppy beer. It's very light on the hops. It has coriander, cumin, grains of paradise, and orange peel. So that type of a beer and a banana pudding infuses those flavors, gives us a nice, subtle flavors of some of the spices in the beer. So that's a brew nana pudding. And then we have our beer smack and cheese, which we'll be actually serving at a charitable event on 119th Street in Harlem to support the homeless El Refectorio. That dish is a beer mac and cheese dish infused with a beer sauce. So we use one of the beers in the sauce, and we layer that into all the layers of the mac and cheese.
So I'm listening to this, and we have more time with you. We're gonna do some news and come back in a few minutes. But I'm hearing about this family reunion, and I'm wondering, is it really a competition when it comes to food? Like, are there more than just one? Is there more than one person with a cookbook out? Like, you have the cookbook out. You've been cooking your whole
Sounds
career.
like she won.
Is there really a competition going on here? You're explaining this food to me, and I'm like, I wouldn't want to go up against this at any family reunion.
Well,
I'm not bringing my...
it's not an official competition, but when the lineup goes on that long table...
Okay, what does it look
Right.
like?
all the main courses, the side dishes, and the desserts, it becomes a competition. Because everybody knows who made which dish.
I wouldn't want my
would
food next
say,
to yours. That's
that
all I'm
certainly
saying.
is kind of competitive.
I wouldn't either.
Hey, does every
Come to the reunion.
I will gladly do that. Does every recipe in here in this book involve beer?
Yeah, everything from beer cocktails to beer sorbet.
These are all things I don't realize that you can put beer into. Like,
Right.
Absolutely, more than what you can use wine for.
does the alcohol get cooked off?
Most.
Can
of
I
it.
give this stuff to my kids?
Oh well.
She's
Not the
like,
beer.
I don't know
not
about
the beer
that.
not the beer cocktails, but
Well,
Maybe the mac and
you
cheese.
could. I mean, my
should I?
She's like,
we
I'm
got
not
to
going to
taste
stop
beer
you.
a little bit growing up, so I think you could. I wouldn't go overboard with it, but there are some kid-friendly dishes in there, I would say, in
Just
moderation.
got to flip through.
Well, we're gonna talk more beer. Maybe do a little drinking of beer if that's allowed in here in just a few minutes when we come back with Celeste Beatty. She's the founder of Harlem Brewing Company. She's also got a brand new cookbook out. It's called Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. You're listening to and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. I do want to get right back to Celeste Beatty. She's founder of Harlem Brewing Company. She is the first black woman to own a brewery in the United States, but you put it a different way. How did you describe it?
I would just say at the time, as we know.
As we know.
Yeah.
As we know.
I mean, from the history that I've learned about, there are black women pretty much in every family I know that brewed beer, wine, sometimes moonshine, and it's in our history books.
She's also the author of a new cookbook, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. I promised that we would crack a can.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. Let's
do
brew
it.
it.
Okay,
Let's
so we're
brew it.
doing
guys.
Brew it. I like
Let's
that.
do
This
this.
is Harlem IPA,
125th Street.
125th Street IPA.
A beautiful can.
Yeah.
Let's hear it. Ooh, yeah. That's the sound you want to hear.
That must have been nice for people on
Wait a
radio.
minute, where's my
Did you guys
beer?
hear that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I took a sip.
Look at us being selfish.
There's some up there.
We'll
I don't
get
want
to
you
it.
to get up and move away from the microphone. We were talking a little earlier, and can you talk a little about the recipe for this, and also the idea that there are these sort of trends within the beer industry? You know, IPAs were huge for so many years, then everybody did an IPA, and then they kind of went out of style, and then farmhouse saisons. Like, you know, what are people loving right now?
Sounds like you know a little bit about beer.
A little bit, yeah.
Well,
You've been known
IPAs
to
are still very
sip some
popular.
beers.
IPAs are still very popular.
Okay.
This is on the hazy side, a New England style IPA. It has about 5 different varieties of hops. If you're familiar with hops, mosaic hops.
Break that
citron
down for me.
hops. Hops.
Me, a non-beer drinker. Break that down for
It's
me.
a flower.
Okay.
It has bittering facets to it. It also has some citrus, some spice.
Okay.
It layers in flavor.
Sounds great.
In the IPAs, it gives it a very deep, sometimes very juicy, citrusy, piney flavor and aroma. So they're flavoring hops, and they're also bittering hops that give hops sort of the balance of sweetness in the malt. That's kind of the role that it plays. I love growing hops. They're amazing. They're so many different uses beyond beer, and they're great to grow. They're perennials. But it's a beautiful sort of pine cone-shaped flower that grows from April through August. Growth period takes place during that time. Harvest takes place during the fall.
So we have the beer, we have the cookbook.
Yes.
What is the next chapter? I mean, I feel like you've done it all, honestly, but
Oh, hardly.
as we're going into 2025, what are you thinking in terms of business expansion?
Definitely thinking about more how do we support our communities. We have Rocky Mount, North Carolina. We're working on a project there that involves brewing education, working with black and brown farmers in eastern North Carolina to grow grains, to get more engaged in the industry. We have our project in Brixton in the UK. That's about bonds across the pond. How do we sort of connect common threads and common cultures around beer? And got a couple of projects we're working on. Our project in Rocky Mount, and then working on something in Harlem, sort of full circle from where we started with Bloomberg.
10 seconds. Where can people buy the beer, and where is it distributed?
The beer can be purchased locally at Craft and Carry, Whole Foods, Melba's Restaurant, Boulevard Bistro, Total Wine and More. What was the rest of it?
Distribution, outside of New York City.
Distribution, primarily in the Northeast, also in the Southeast, and in the UK.
So it can be bought many, many different places.
Many places. You can
Everywhere.
order it through Uber Eats and things
look
of
at
that
that.
nature as well.
Celeste Beatty, she is the founder of Harlem Brewing Company, the new cookbook, Harlem Brew Soul, a beer-infused soul food cookbook. This is Bloomberg.